How do we get the users to actually use it? How do we figure out if they actually want it? It's a much less flexible business model. If you combine like developments in AI with developments in AR with developments in robotics, you apply that to different categories, manufacturing being the obvious one.
In terms of making the newsletter more valuable than anyone else, like what are the last true bolts here?
It's like if you wanted to make your laptop an email server with an open source MTA, you actually can, which is kind of insane.
What have you found out about email and B2B sending platforms?
When you're sort of putting together your newsletter strategy, the main thing you want to focus on, of course, is...
Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Liam. It's good. I'm glad we're finally doing it. We were talking about doing it for a while.
Yeah, I think it must... How long have we known each other, worked with each other? Like a year and a half now?
Yeah, like a year and a half, something like that.
Yeah. And was it Lewis? I think it might have been Lewis that first introduced us, right?
I think it was, yeah.
Okay. I think I mentioned Lewis on this podcast a lot, so hopefully the audience knows who he is. I got one question for you. Are you at a standing desk right now?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about the standing desk. Is it a good idea or bad idea?
No, there's nothing that special about it. It's a big IKEA standing desk. No presets. My sister worked at IKEA, so I got like a massive discount on this thing. And but yeah, it just goes up and down. I like to stand probably like half the day.
Okay. I might need to I'm in a WeWork cave, if you can't tell by the fucking production background here right now, but if I ever end up with a house where I can put a standing desk in it, it's definitely something that I've wanted to try. Do you feel as if there's a difference in the way that you think when you're standing versus sitting?
I think so. I mean, at least for me, I like to break up like blocks of tasks. So it's like I might sit down and do a few things in the morning and then like go for a walk, go somewhere, go to a meeting, come back. And then that's like a break where like now it's easier for me to transition into like something else entirely. Same thing with like sitting and standing. It's like if I complete like a block of work, I might switch between sitting and standing. It's just like a psychological thing to just like help me feel like I'm not just in the same place all the time.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, that's exactly why I have an office in a WeWork as well, is because I have to get out of my house and I'll do like some of the morning here, then I'll have lunch, and then I'll do the afternoon in the cafe as well. So I completely understand the psychological aspect.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of co-working too. Like I was a WeWork guy for a while. Right now there's a place in Austin called Capital Factory, which basically has a bunch of, it's mostly like venture-backed tech teams that work out of Capital Factory, but it's like co-working space. So there's like lots of investors and just like random businesses sort of like floating around in there. And it's a pretty cool space downtown. But I might switch back to WeWork because the big advantage for WeWork is that they have so many locations. When you travel, it's like you always have somewhere to work. And that's really nice.
Yeah, it is nice, but I think there's probably a degree of separation in the quality of the companies. You're describing all these venture-backed companies. I'm in Montreal right now. I think the majority of the companies here are baguette-making factories and cheese-making marketing companies, potentially. I don't know. They're all speaking fucking French, so yeah, I've got no idea.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, because the venture-backed scene I find really interesting where it's like a whole different universe to me that I've only recently just started like socializing in. It's like when you go to WeWork, to your point, it's like it'll be like random businesses or it'll be a collection of like, digital agencies, things like that. And you're like, but these are guys who sort of like live and die by their sales calls. Like they have to create things that people want to buy and they have to sell them. And that's how the whole business works. When you're around venture teams, sometimes they're working on just technology that frankly, like it just doesn't operate that way. They're like, well, we're building like a rocket ship. It's going to go into space. And you're like, yeah, like you have to fund that. That needs capital. But sometimes I talk to a venture-backed team and I'm like, maybe you guys should be bootstrapped because you've talked to me for like 15 minutes. I still don't know what your product does. Or like why,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I think there's like, sometimes there's pros and cons to kind of both sides of the coin where like in the bootstrap world, you don't have the luxury of the capital and like the speed and the scale and everything that comes with like being venture-backed. But then I think sometimes in venture-backed, it can turn into this almost like luxury experience where you kind of you aren't sometimes selling, or it depends on the investor expectations. It's like honestly, it kind of psychs me out because sometimes I'm just like, how does this work at all? Like it's strange to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most terrifying signs in conversations I have as well, is when someone can't explain how they make money in the space of the first minute. I immediately have lost all trust. Do
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's gone. It's disappeared. Have you, in terms of these, this is, I guess, we're getting broad pretty quickly, right? So we're talking about VC backed companies, and you kind of mentioned the idea of them building stuff that people potentially don't need. They can't really explain what it does. Do you think that that problem is going to get worse now that AI is advancing so rapidly and just technology is getting swallowed up by these mega companies?
It's a good question. I mean, I think to some extent, I actually think we'll see a boom in bootstrap tech
Okay.
because the barrier to entry for tech is going down. Like, obviously, like if you talk to a developer, any good developer will tell you that vibe coding isn't really quite there yet. Like, it's
Yeah.
surprisingly good and it's advancing really quickly. But building a full app without having any technical knowledge is like still not quite a thing. Um, Although if you find a good developer and they're sort of like managing the AI workflows and things like that can work. It really just depends on the product. Um, so my hunch is that we'll actually see VC drift more towards like critical infrastructure. So it'll be, you know, it'll be like actual physical products, physical infrastructure. That's why I think things like Palantir and like even like defense tech, like things that are really expensive and also like robotics and
Yeah.
manufacturing. Like I think a
Musk
lot of
says that
yeah,
like by 2030 it's going to be one of the biggest industries in the world is robotics.
yeah. Well, it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense because I think AI is kind of getting all the hype right now, but there's like technology in general is advancing in pretty much every category really quickly, including robotics. So it's like if you combine like developments in AI with developments in AR with developments in robotics, and then you apply that to different categories, manufacturing being the obvious one. It's like I just think we'll see the capital drift more towards that direction. And if somebody's just trying to create a simple little SaaS product that they hope to one day like sell to HubSpot or something, I think the likelihood that that business can pretty easily be bootstrapped or maybe just raise like a $500,000 and then sell within 2 years. Like I think we'll see a lot more of that.
Yeah. Or it's just internal tooling. Instead of someone having to build a company for it, they're just like, I'm going to build this thing that's going to help me with my job. And what was a
Yep.
$20 million a year SaaS business is just like made like that in an instant, which
Yeah,
is
actually, I did that this week because
really,
we had a ROI calculator on our website, and when we were putting the website up, I just used some calculator builder service. It was like $10 a month, and I could build the calculator that we just embedded on our website. And I was looking at it, and I was like, "This is like the perfect thing to vibe code." So I just went to GPT-5, and in like 3 or 4 hours, I vibe coded the exact same thing with, and actually added like a lead magnet, some other things to it, and then deployed that as my own iframe embed, and then went and canceled my account on the SaaS. And it works. It works. It's actually better than it was before.
all for $10 a month. But I imagine the inspiration of the goal here wasn't to save $10 a month. It's like, can I do this? And you can. What do you
Exactly.
think of GPT-5?
It's interesting. Like, I think the public reaction to it is sort of like at least what I'm seeing on like Twitter is mostly people kind of saying it was overhyped. I think it does. In terms of what it does, it's still really impressive. I think giving it the full like GPT-5 sort of like version name set the bar really high. Like I think the expectation was that this was going to be like another like order of magnitude better than everything we had before. And while it is an improvement, it's not like a multiple better than 4.1 or O3 or anything like that. So I think it's good. It's also apparently it's a router. I think you guys probably know this too. Like it's basically routing tasks to the cheapest model. So the quality of the average output might actually go down, but the cost efficiency goes up. Like different components like that. But I saw a guy make Photoshop like one shotted built Photoshop with one prompt in GPT-5, and like actually like 80-90% of the features worked. Like it was just straight up Photoshop as a web app. You could upload pictures and do layer masks. It was like pretty much everything you could do in Photoshop. He built it and he just gave GPT-5 one prompt to do it. And when I saw that, I was like, all right, I'm just going to start vibe coding with this thing because it seems pretty sick.
Yeah, it's incredible. I need to vibe code more actually. I was just listening to the 20 VC podcast with the Lovable founder. I don't know if you've heard much from him, like on podcasts and stuff, and he's just talking about what they're building and their kind of competition, where they're going to get swallowed up by Claude and ChatGPT. And something that really comes across is just like the rate of development. The only thing that they're focused on is making the user experience better, bringing out more features, making it faster to use, making the things that you can build with it better. Like, I don't know where this goes. Where do you think this goes in a couple of years' time?
Well, I mean, I'm not a developer, right? So take my opinion with, I guess that in mind. But for the last like 5-6 months, it's just seemed to me that, like, for example, a good example is like there's a buddy of mine is an executive at this giant WordPress agency. So all they do is like write WordPress code. They work with like huge companies, like big brand names, and they do WordPress development for them. And he said, and I've heard this from a few other founders and people who work within development studios, that just by implementing AI strategically, so it's like, you're not using it to do everything, but you're strategically using it to like, write functions or plan out like certain pieces of it. And you have, intelligent senior developers using AI. Anyway, what he said was that they had actually reduced their the cost of their of software development by 25% within the last 12 months just by using AI. And I'm like, well, that's massive, right? So even just in terms of like their P&L looks way better and their output is faster. So that it's creating a lot of efficiencies. Where it seems like AI is still not quite there yet is, well, on the one hand, you have like kind of the obvious things, which are like security issues, right? So there's like all the drama about the T app. It seems like once a week I see somebody on Twitter say like, oh, I just launched my app. And then like within 10 minutes, they get like DDoSed or like something ridiculous happens that like, if you actually had a software development team, like this would never happen. But because you vibe coded the app, like, you had all these vulnerabilities.
This is what he describes. I'm listening to the podcast with the Replit founder. I can't remember his name again. And the guy from Lovable as well. And when they're on these podcasts, what the host usually says is that the security right now is better than like an individual developer that would just launch like security protocols by themselves, but it's not quite at the point that it would be better than a whole team. So it's like somewhere in the middle right now. And that's like a big thing that they're focusing on, is making sure that security gets better.
Yeah. So I think like, but I would imagine it's only a matter of time before AI is good enough to be like, hey, we shouldn't like expose your API keys like in the file, right? Just like really simple, like, because a lot of OpEx, especially for like small SaaS apps that aren't dealing with tons of traffic or that aren't like big honeypots for, hackers or anything like that. If it's just like your standard sort of consumer or just like a small, I guess people are calling it micro SaaS now. Like I think AI is getting really close to being able to pretty much make something, at least an MVP front to back really quickly. Because I know even like apparently in YC, it's like pretty much every company in YC is just like purely vibe coding their MVP and then getting funding and then basically burning it to the ground and rebuilding it. and so it's like it's a really fast way to prototype. It's a really fast way to get a product to market and just see if someone will buy it, which is a huge part of PMF. Because there's it's like if I just make this thing really quickly and then find out if it'll get traction, then we know if we want to take a step back and like actually hire developers and really build this or not. And so you can get a lot of efficiency in sort of like your spend and finding PMF. I think you can find PMF probably faster now than ever, which is a
product
really
market
big deal.
fit for anyone that doesn't know the acronym.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but then on the other hand, I think the skill that's still irreplaceable is basically like coming up with product ideas that are things that solve actual problems, or that's something that somebody would actually want to buy. Like the sort of like business acumen plus technical acumen that just goes into like knowing what to create and like what it should be and what it should be like and what people will want. I think that part is at least for now is immune to AI.
Let's talk about that. For someone that's just listening to this podcast, they can't see what's on your head. Ben currently has a hat on and it says Breaker. And we're talking about things that people actually want to buy and are actually useful and have product market fit. So the context of this is that when some people are younger, some people dream of becoming doctors, some people want to become NFL players, some people want to become astronauts. But Ben, since he was 5 years old, wanted to become an email expert, a B2B email expert. And this is kind of where we are today. So Ben, take me from there.
Yeah. So this is just helpful background, which is I mean totally. As a kid, I was like, I want to send a lot of newsletters, like just a lot of newsletters. That's been the idea the whole time. No, but actually, I got into it inadvertently. So like in college, like I studied economics, and the plan was actually to go to law school after that. But then coming out of college, I had job offers to get into marketing roles, and so I was like, well, I should just enter the workforce. I can go to law school anytime I want to. And so I just started working at different startup teams. So I worked at like a string of different startups. I would work at a startup for like 12 months, 18 months, and then I'd bounce to another one. And so worked in a bunch of different industries, worked in like ed tech, I worked in news publishing, and then eventually made my way into e-commerce. And so obviously like working at those startups, being kind of a one-man band marketer type person, had done a ton of email just sort of incidentally in those roles. And then when I got into e-commerce, I really niched down into doing email marketing specifically for a big beauty brand. And then that's where I really started to drill into like, how do you grow lists? How does deliverability work? What are like the unit economics of email marketing? Like just, got real deep on that. And then that beauty brand sold to a private equity company. After they sold to private equity, the job got really, really boring. And so I just started taking on jobs on the side. So I just started taking on consulting clients. I started working with publishers like the New York Sun, the Dallas Express, like news publishers. Usually they were hiring me for help with deliverability and growth. Like that was typically what I was being contracted for. So then in the process of just selling services as a consultant, developed a really unique growth strategy that was working incredibly well for them. Then I packaged that growth strategy up into an offer, which is, that we would grow email lists for 75 cents per subscriber. That offer scaled from like 0 to 1.5 million in 10 months. And so when I saw that happen, I was like, okay, I was like, we have PMF, but our process, we're running it as an agency. So we basically have like an army of VAs and a bunch of Loctite processes behind this business. And I was like, but if we literally just took what we were doing right now, turned it into a SaaS product, right? Put a bunch of customers on the SaaS, and then even sold it at the same revenue range, we would exit for a much higher multiple. And so that's why in the last like 12 months or so, I've like been getting into building software for the first time ever. So this is kind of like a new thing for me.
Before we hop into the software and what it does and stuff, that product market fit, that amount of exponential growth, why are people so hungry for newsletters? Why are people so hungry for newsletter subscribers?
Because I think the reason is that it's distribution. Like I noticed the wave start to move in the direction of email marketing. Really around the time when I think it was the iOS 14 update that basically nuked Facebook ads.
Mm.
At least temporarily, they've done a lot to sort of like fix it. But even now, like a lot of my buddies in advertising are sort of saying that like CPMS are going up and like advertising is still a pretty tough game. And so when that happened, like I was working at the beauty brand when that happened. And so executives wanted to reduce advertising spend, but they didn't want the bottom line to go down. And so we basically just went more aggressive on email marketing, and the bottom line actually went up and our advertising spend went down. And just like having that experience, I was like, wow, email is like incredibly powerful. Like we were kind of like sitting on this potential the whole time that was always there. And if you dial it in, you can generate a ton of revenue. It depends on your business model, depends on everything, and your growth model, et cetera. But I think that's what kind of created the vibe shift. The other thing that I think created a shift in B2B was, B2B businesses have relied on cold outbound email outreach for forever. I don't know, 15 years, something like that. And so then um, Google, Yahoo, now Microsoft, like a bunch of the ISPs have been tightening up the standards that are required to basically have your emails inbox. And as a result of that, even just doing traditional cold outbound, like the strategies that worked 5 years ago, don't really work anymore. And so as a byproduct of that, a lot of B2B businesses started to get into organic social and newsletters as a way of sort of, adding to their portfolio of top of funnel to drive sales demand for their businesses, their services. And so that was actually mostly when we were doing the agency with Forward. That was mostly the wave that we captured was just tons of random agencies that were starting newsletters as a way of getting top of funnel distribution to their ICP. And because our growth strategy provided an exact audience match, in addition to providing a really cost effective cost per subscriber, that was kind of the sweet spot for us, was like, B2B businesses between like maybe 1 to 10 million. So you'd call it like SMB B2B essentially. Those businesses were creating newsletters like crazy. And I think that wave is still going. I don't think it's growing quite as fast as it was growing maybe last year, but it's still like email marketing is bigger than ever.
Yeah, everyone plus their grand's dog, plus their grand's dog's budgie is making a newsletter these days, right? When you've got tools like Beehive and ConvertKit making it so easy and the barrier to entry so low, like everyone's making them, and then you add in how good Claude and ChatGPT and different tools are at writing and researching, and then you add in MCP protocols to call through APIs. Like the ability to actually produce content has never been lower, and distribution has never been easier. So that kind of poses a question for you in terms of making your newsletter stand out, in terms of making your newsletter more valuable than anyone else. Like, what are the lasting true moats here?
I mean, it really is. It's really niche specific. That's how I look at it, and it's also, it depends on the audience and it depends on the monetization model. So the way I look at it is
take us for example, right? Like let's just use a live case study, right? We're in the newsletter industry. We sell like B2B offerings at the back end. You know our business model intimately. And we also sell like live training, stuff like that. We're in the AI industry, kind of B2B. Talk me through like what you would see there in terms of us building a moat.
In terms of what?
Us building a moat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the advantage that you guys had was that you sort of moved into the sort of AI newsletter space early enough that you guys captured a ton of the interest early on, which is great. So like you have that, you kind of have the wind at your back from that perspective in terms of your readership and everything else. And so that's like a timing thing, because now it's like there's like probably like hundreds of AI newsletters, but you guys are one of the probably like top 5. I think when you're sort of putting together your newsletter strategy, there's the main thing you want to focus on, of course, is what's the revenue model. So if your primary means of monetizing the audience that you're building with your newsletter, for example, is sponsorships, you're essentially optimizing for click traffic to sponsors one way or another. And so you have to, it's actually a really good exercise, even if you're just getting started and you're not big enough to really go after big sponsors, is to just think like, if like in a theoretical world, Salesforce was sponsoring my newsletter, what subscribers would they want me to have to want to sponsor the newsletter? And then you start with that growth mindset of like, okay, I'm going after this niche. I'm delivering content to the niche that's interesting to them. And then that way, if I'm delivering clicks to sponsors in this niche, those clicks are relevant to them. They're probably going to see sales from, the newsletter as a channel, and everything's going to be great. Same thing applies, in your guys' case, if you're like upselling like higher ticket services or consulting, same thought process. But you just start with that end in mind of like, if I'm going to sell B2B services, I don't just want to build a giant consumer list of like random people who happen to be interested in AI news. While there may be some value in that, you want to build a list of contacts that actually might buy the services at some point. So that's the way I actually think of it, as content audience match. To me, content audience match is the product market fit of just marketing in general, but also for newsletters as well, which is if you're creating content that's interesting to a specific audience, then they'll keep reading your newsletter. And if they keep reading your newsletter and then you put complimentary offers, and you promote those offers to that audience, then your likelihood of delivering relevant clicks to your sponsors and selling the things that you want to sell to them is much higher than if you kind of just grow it as like, oh, I just want a big list. I want 100,000 subs, whatever that kind of thought process is.
Assuming we have the content like audience match already, like they're the people we want to connect with our stuff, what do you think separates like decent content from amazing content? What are the actual components to incredible content in a newsletter format?
Yeah, I think especially if you're in a space as competitive as like reporting about I basically think of it as like a function of uniqueness. And this is
Yeah.
what I saw with even like when I work with news publishers, right? So I work with the New York Sun. I also worked at a news startup. I was one of the first hires at a news startup called the Texan, which is like a local Texas public policy outlet, things like that. And what was interesting is like I worked at some outlets that had a hard stance of like we don't publish any opinion, and then I worked at other outlets that would publish opinion editorials. And without fail, the outlets that published opinion editorials made more money, period. And the reason for that is that they're delivering some type of unique commentary, opinion, or they have a personality attached to the brand, right? Like this person is an exclusive columnist of XYZ. When you have something like that, that means that you actually have a differentiated content product against what everyone else is doing. And so then if you put that content behind a paywall, people actually they have a reason to buy. They if you're just doing some variation of news aggregation, that can work, and that can work still if you're doing like sponsorships, for example. But if your goal is like selling product or paywalling content, what goes behind the paywall has to be something that I can't just get off of like Google News, basically. Like, because then
Yeah.
it's like, why would I pay for something I can get for free, right? There's no differentiation. But so yeah, that's the primary way. Same thing with like if you're trying to create a product and you're looking for PMF, one of the big things you need to think about is what is the differentiation of this product against everything else in the market. The same is true in newsletters for your monetization model, which is what am I offering to this space that no one else is offering? And ideally, that offering has a moat around it, which is either like the person creating the content is an expert, or you have access to some type of information or opinion or commentary that other publishers in your niche don't have access to. If you have that, then your odds of having a very profitable publishing business is much higher.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. Something we're launching starting next week is partner columns, and it's something that we're expanding massively. So we've already got kind of agents, social media, um, a few kind of different things covered, and I've not confirmed them yet, but we're in talks to get pretty large companies in to do weekly submissions for law and governance, which is a massive discussion right now, and HR as well. So we're really excited about bringing that in, bringing a bit of unique perspective. And I kind of couldn't agree more in terms of that. I think it fits under the umbrella of brand and identity, right? It's like, who's your newsletter and how is it different from other people? Like, it's one, the content you're putting out, the style, the tone, but I think that's mostly replicable. And then two, it's like, can you provide content that just doesn't exist? It's not on a pre-trained model anywhere. And there's no kind of substitute for that as well, right? As much as AI can help produce everything up until then, in terms of getting that does actually take actual work. And it does take you going out and finding those people, making those relationships and making it
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and while like, and I think it's an interesting thing where I think that actually becomes more valuable because basically AI is empowering such an explosion of slop content that like if you're AI, you can AI generate content, and you can get good content from AI if you're good at prompting. And like Lewis is basically like the pro at this, right? And but at the same time, it's like if your content is something anyone can get out of an AI, then you don't really have any. Your business is not really defensible.
Take me back to the formation of Breaker. You're at a point where there's solutions out there for AI newsletters, primarily D2C. You've got this kind of winning methodology where people want subscribers, you can get them subscribers through growth. And like, when did you decide that like SaaS would be a possibility? And kind of take me through those initial steps.
Yeah. So I think we were in a particularly good position to turn our service into a technology business. I think there are some services, like if what you're selling is essentially like expert consulting, that's much harder to automate. Of course, you can sort of create like downstream offers, like you can make agents and knowledge bases and things like that and sort of like sell access to them. It's not quite the same as getting customized consulting from a person who is an expert in their niche. With what we were doing, we created a very repeatable process and that process was being executed, based on a series of SOPs. And so when I looked at the business, pretty much from day one, at least like a few months into running it as an agency, I was thinking this could totally be a software product. So even just from turning a service into a SaaS, I thought it was a good candidate for that. Also, selfishly, it's like, well, if I sell the business at an agency multiple versus a SaaS multiple, generally SaaS businesses go for much higher multiples. So I was like, I could also like make a ton more money, like life-changing money on an exit if we turned it into a SaaS and sold it.
What does an agency multiple go for? Is it usually like 2-3x max?
It depends. So like if your agency, basically like your best case scenario on an agency is like if the business is a decent size, so generally like mid 6 figures or even 8 figures, and the business is not reliant on like the founder for like sales and fulfillment and things like that. If you fully operationalized it where essentially it can grow and operate on like independent of the founder, then at that point the business is truly an asset that someone else could buy and essentially cash flow with. And so if your business, basically like a best in class agency, can exit for as much as like a 6x.
Okay.
But yeah, typically if you're on the smaller side, like, below 7 figures or like low 7 figures, and your business is missing a couple of key things, like it's very reliant on the founder for sales, for example, but the founder wants to step away from the business, then you're looking at closer to like 1.5 or 2. So it just depends on the buyer and everything else. Versus on the flip side of that, like SaaS multiples on prior to a seed round, like, or even prior to a Series A SaaS business that's growing at a good clip can go for as much as like a 15 or a 16x. So that it's quite a bit more. A 10x is probably like a more realistic, but still it's like, it's a lot more than a service-based business.
Talk to me about like the mindset shift between running an agency versus running a SaaS, because any fucking agency owner I know, the degree of churn that you have to go through and just like the mental stress of having to run an agency and make that work is just a different type of stress and a different type of mental energy that you need to expend on doing a SaaS. It seems to me from the outside, and I've never done either essentially, but it seems to me from the outside that when you're running an agency, it's very much just like eat what you kill, get as many customers in, try to keep retention as high as possible, and it's just a constant cycle of stress. Whereas it seems as if it's more in kind of waves or stages with SaaS, right? You follow this process, we go and do this, we test this hypothesis, and maybe that works, and then we go and build from there. Tell me about your experience.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's similar to that. Honestly, one of the weird things about it that was the hardest for me is like whenever the agency, there was something that like wasn't working, or we had like oversold and like our team couldn't realistically fulfill. It's like, because it's a service, like I can just literally step in and fulfill on things. It's sort of like if you run a hot dog stand and there's too many people at the hot dog cart, it's like, well, you can just make more until you run out of hot dog. It's just sort of like, it's the problem solution is very simple, and you can sort of just grind. And that if you just grind, you make, it equals more revenue. And so that part of it I liked because I had a lot of sort of just like control over the product and the process and everything. And you could kind of step into different places strategically as there was need. With SaaS, it's like, because I'm not a developer, I know a lot more about it now than I did before, but I'm working with a team that's building the product. And every time you want to change something about the product, it has a lot more implications for even the infrastructure that you've built on, or the dev team, or even the end customer experience. And so there is a lot more planning that kind of goes into, you essentially start what I learned too late is the right way to start, is to essentially start with you actually start with like UI UX. So you're like, what does the product look like? What buttons does the user have? What are they doing? And then, what does the product deliver as a result of what the user is doing on the application? And then you essentially build the front end and the back end based on that UI UX. So that's like, to your point, it's much more of like a planned sort of process. And then, but by the same token, what's more difficult is like agencies are nice and flexible where, if I just wanted to go off and like sell some random consulting, I could do it. and that's just like a service. And now that's just more revenue for the agency or whatever it is, right? With the SaaS, it's like, oh, we want to add this feature. It's like, okay, well, we need to like plan the implication for the UI UX. What are the implications for the front end and the back end? How do we test it? How do we get the users to actually use it? How do we figure out if they actually want it? Like, it's much more complex. It's a much less flexible business model, which is why, like, to some extent, I think in some cases, a great way to go is to basically essentially like find PMF with something that you can deliver manually as a service, because you could just basically change it every day, right? You could change the offer, you can change the fulfillment, you just change it. And then once you figure out like, okay, people will buy this and this like delivers the outcome that they want very reliably, then go through the process of turning that into a SaaS. That's like I think that's actually like a pretty intelligent way to make the transition, because you're not making a SaaS and then saying, oh, we don't have PMF. And then now you're like rewriting half your application.
How are you finding the mental shift? Because I imagine with all of these kind of planning layers, you need to have a lot more patience and you can't just hammer out the work. Like, are you ever finding yourself sitting there like, I can't do anything because everything's just in development right now?
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about it is I feel a lot less useful. So like, it's like there's always things I could do, right? Like I could just go talk to more investors. I could go talk to more customers who might use the private beta. I could like book more demos. I could make more marketing content for my thing, right? I could whatever, right? There's always things you could do, but there's less things I can do that I feel like are like truly fundamental to the business, because it's like, well, the dev team is like following the Gantt chart and we're on track on the Gantt chart, and it's like it's very like, to me that's like that's difficult, because I'm used to just being able to like jump in and figure out how to provide the most value possible to the business. I guess in the SaaS, like I feel like I have a lot less control.
Yeah, that's interesting. If we ever get into SaaS ourselves, maybe I'll tap you on the shoulder and ask for some advice before we do it. But it's interesting you say the idea of like building the UI and the UX first, and essentially like, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're trying to do there is basically test whether people will buy, test whether there's demand, and test whether the demand converts first before building the back end. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it depends on the application, but if somebody's actually going to use it, like in a private beta context, you have to have like something that they can use that provides some degree of functionality. But just
Okay.
from like a planning stages process, it's starting with what is the user experience and what does it look like, and then building the technology based on that. It just means that you're not having to reconfigure the back end because you change the front end, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I got you. That makes sense. Bring me back into the formation breaker. There's obviously a bunch of solutions out there. You got like, what separates what you're building now from the competition? Like, what is the actual need and demand, and why would someone use Breaker instead of anything else that's out there currently?
Yeah, so the main thing that differentiates Breaker from another email platform is that it's both an email platform and an automated lead generation tool. So
Okay.
it's like it's Mailchimp, but the list grows itself, right? And that's
Okay.
pretty different. Um, so in terms of like the onboarding that customers will be going through once this gets out of private beta in about a month, you literally are signing up for the product. You're signing up for some kind of subscription, and every subscription on Breaker is both a combination of your send volume. So it's like, how many emails are you sending each month? That's like part of the subscription. And then the other part of the subscription is how many subscribers do you want to add to your newsletter distribution every month? And so like every subscription is a combination of those two numbers. And then in the onboarding, the subscriber or the users, the end users, the customers, they essentially have like a Facebook audience builder. They tell us what audience they want, and then in the background, it grows for them with like a matching algorithm. So also the sophistication of delivery from the agency is like 10x more sophisticated than it was before as well.
I think anyone that's worked in email or anyone that's working in marketing right now knows how difficult lead gen has gotten and how much that has changed and how much it changes every single day. I remember at the start of us running this, like just over 2 years ago now, we basically got paid to grow through a combination of Facebook ads and Sparkloop. And now a majority of Facebook ads are dead. Like Twitter does not work for us anymore. Like it's a constant battle of running a newsletter between deliverability, between growth, between getting your content right, defensibility. There's a lot that goes into it. So having growth handled is an incredibly attractive component to that. Can you talk to me more about how that works? I don't know how much of this is proprietary, how much you can actually share, but talk to me more about how growth actually works.
Yeah. So and also to your point, like part of the reason why we saw so much demand with B2B was because, your your tools typically for newsletter growth is some combination of like Facebook ads, Google ads, and then something like Spark Loop. Those are like the
and
paid
a
channel.
shady guy in your LinkedIn DMs every week.
Okay, yeah, well, I guess that would count as like organic. That's like organic from cold out, whatever. It's not paid, I guess. But yeah, so those are like, that's like typically how a lot of newsletters grow. You end up, depending on the niche, like there are some niches, like I know some guys who are crushing it in local newsletters and getting like 10-cent subscribers, and it's like, that's amazing. But most niches, you're going to be spending anywhere from like $2 to $15 per subscriber, depending on like the targeting and what you really want. And then even beyond that, with the advertising, the control that you have with the advertising, it can really vary to where, I've seen plenty of cases where, half the list or more than half of the list didn't even really fit within the ICP. It's like, yeah, we ran ads and these people sign up for the newsletter, but they're not, these are competitors, or like they're not actual buyers of the thing that we're selling, et cetera. And so the efficiency is frankly really low, in my opinion, for most lead generation methods, both from like a cost perspective and a targeting perspective. And so with Breaker, it's like we're really looking to break that mold by essentially saying, like, if you're telling us you want this type of subscriber, that's actually the only subscriber that you will get, and you're paying, generally speaking, below market rate for most lead generation strategies in order to acquire those subscribers. So that's a big part of the reason for the attraction for the lead generation methodology. In terms of how the system works, yeah, there's a lot of components of it that I can't discuss, but there's data networks, there's data warehouses, there's publisher networks, there's a matching algorithm, and then a big part of what we do as well for both compliance and deliverability is we essentially get subscribers to engage with your content before we even deliver them to your list and even like charge you for it. So when you're paying like $1.50 for a subscriber on Breaker, that's a subscriber that fits your ICP and has already engaged with your content. And so especially like early on, we've had newsletters in our private beta that have like, frankly, like kind of ridiculous. It's like 80% open rates and like 20% CTRs because they're getting those pre-qualified leads. So that's like broad brush. That's how it works, where it's like we take your targeting dimensions. We do like, there's like freaking 50 steps in between that and them being delivered to you as a subscriber, but they're being qualified and then also being qualified further by whether or not they're actually going to engage with your content, which is something that also doesn't exist in most lead generation. Like maybe the occasional person that comes from like an ad and signs up for a newsletter reads the newsletter first, but I wouldn't be surprised if 90% plus of subscribers that sign up for a newsletter, they're essentially subscribing almost purely on the basis of, does this look like something that would be interesting to me? But they haven't, when they subscribe, they haven't actually seen the content. They don't actually know that.
In terms of the people in the private beta and who you kind of foresee this being the most useful for, get specific for me beyond just B2B individuals or SMEs. Like, who is this going to be a best fit for? Industry, psychographic, like, who do you think this is going to be most useful for? Or is it going to be pretty broad?
It can be broad. It's like, it's the most of the interest that we get is in B2B. We do also support consumer audiences. We just haven't marketed to them very aggressively, frankly. But it's usually, frankly, like it's a lot of agencies. Like agencies love this because they can build a simple newsletter. They can publish their case studies and their opinions about the industry, and they know that that's going to actual prospects who might retain their services. So agencies is definitely like a hot pocket for us. I think technology companies. So like we already have, we're building partnerships with like accelerator funds, different technology businesses that essentially can refer business. So I would say that's like the typical. Then there's sort of like the B2B publisher, which I would kind of put you guys in that category of like your audience is essentially B2B, but you operate as a publisher where it's like, yes, you do sell some services, you sell a lot of sponsorships, and you operate primarily as a media brand with these other sort of things. Whereas like I would say our typical customer operates actually primarily as some type of service business where the newsletter is a marketing channel for that service business. It's not, I don't really consider that to be like a pure like media brand. And then there's like consumer media brands, which is, we haven't gotten into much. It's something that we can support. We just haven't seen as much demand. Although surprisingly, what I didn't realize until the last like 2 weeks is that from a pricing perspective of like using our platform to send emails versus using a variety of different other platforms, it looks like we can beat almost all of them on price. And so we're already attracting like a lot of enterprise customers just purely on the basis that we would charge them less to just send their emails than a lot of these other platforms would, which is kind of interesting.
During the development of this, I imagine you have to go very deep into every intricacy and every hole of how email and deliverability and growth works and what the laws and the regulations are. Like, what have you found out? I don't want to uncover too much of your secret sauce, but what have you found out about email and B2B sending platforms? And I guess just about like jumping into these different holes that's maybe surprised you. Has anything kind of caught you off guard?
I don't know. I guess I've been, I guess, more or less studying compliance for a while, just working with big publishers, doing deliverability, et cetera. So there's not like a whole lot of parts of this process that have really surprised me. Being an ESP, so like ultimately, a lot of the laws that regulate email compliance apply to the senders themselves. And so it's really the job of an ESP to essentially just like help senders be compliant. That's like, but it's not the same as being the sender. And so even like, it's kind of interesting, like an ESP doesn't even necessarily have to provide you with unsubscribe links.
Wow.
They just do because it's a good idea. And if they don't, like their IPs will get hosed, right? But like the whole, like even like where Google and Yahoo, for example, require like one-click unsubscribes, which is something that you put into the email header, like that is a sender requirement, and the ESPs support it as a feature, but the obligation is actually on the sender. And so, we approach it from the same perspective of we want our customers to basically think about deliverability and compliance as little as possible. So we provide like the sending infrastructure that we've built out is frankly very unique. I'm not aware of any other ESP that has sending infrastructure that's the same as ours, because it's shared sending infrastructure that has a lot of advanced routing. But the whole idea behind everything that we're building is somebody should be able to come onto the platform, make a newsletter, grow their list, and then focus on sales or monetization or whatever they're doing without having to worry about, the intricacies of deliverability and compliance, because it is getting more complex. Like obviously in Europe, you have GDPR. There's similar regulations in like Brazil and Australia, for example. The audiences that we deliver are US based audiences. And so that's like from a growth perspective, it's all about compliance with US laws, which are comparatively more relaxed than a lot of the laws around the world. And but that being said, compliance with like at the state level is becoming more advanced. So like different states are implementing different regulations about businesses that essentially process a lot of PII, personally identifiable information, which usually includes an email address. And so, we work with compliance experts and lawyers just to make sure that we're doing everything to be compliant with at the state level. And so a big part of that is just like, handling unsubscribes, handling delete requests, things like that. So I guess, yeah, we could get into more detail. It gets kind of boring after a while, but that's.
I don't even think it would be boring. I think it'd be beyond the complexity that most listeners could understand, to be honest, if we're going to get deep into compliance as well. I don't think it would be especially I think people are thinking a lot about compliance with AI. We are doing a ton of like B2B and enterprise training. And a lot of the classes that we deliver, we have at least 5 or 6 people every single class put their hand up and be like, well, is this legal? Is this kind of compliant for my organization? I don't really know. And then I think after that Trump bill as well is like, you've not got anything that's nationwide anymore. You have this patchwork of state regulations where Colorado is way different from California, which is way different from Oregon. So beyond just email, like AI in general, compliance is very confusing at the moment, and it's definitely something that's top of mind.
Yeah.
I am curious with your senders and people that are on your platform, how many of them are AI companies and how many of them are like actively using or selling AI products or services?
That's a good question. There aren't any that come to top of mind. It's like right now in private beta, it's like, a PR company. There's like a law firm that does like, workforce disputes. There's like, it's a bunch of different types of businesses, but that are, yeah, I guess we haven't attracted much of the sort of AI wave of newsletters yet. I'm sure they'll be on the platform here pretty soon.
Yeah, we need to make it really attractive for us.
Yeah. We do use AI sort of in our process. We're on an AI domain.
Yeah.
But just from like a content perspective, not as much publishing about AI.
You're obviously deeply knowledgeable at this. You've mentioned a lot of things that are very unique and proprietary to you guys. What do you think makes your business model or what you're trying to do defensible in the long term?
You mean like basically like our sort of long-term moat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least like for now, the moat, a lot of the moat is in the process, like just in how the algorithm works, how our sending infrastructure works. Like to me, that is real IP. And then beyond that, it's like our algorithm is just going to get smarter and smarter and smarter the more customers that are on the platform. So it's kind of similar to how, if you go on Facebook ads and you say, I want to sell fishing rods. It's like, well, how is Facebook so good at targeting the right users on their platform with that offer? It's because they have a lot of data points about users on their platform and like which ones are buying and which ones are into like sports and outdoors, et cetera. And so our algorithm is essentially collecting a lot of similar data points. So it's like, I actually think about what we're building very much as like kind of it's like Facebook ads, but it's on email, where there's like a really powerful algorithm that just gets smarter and smarter and smarter. The more users, the more subscribers, the more newsletters. And then it just gets better and better and better at targeting and at delivering, and then ultimately at helping the newsletters on our platform monetize and get the results that they want out of the platform.
Yeah, I guess what that comes down to, for to encapsulate that, it's proprietary data, it's unique data, right? Like
Yeah.
ultimately, what you're feeding the algorithm with is data that other people don't have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I think about our business long term as well. Is like technology is no longer a moat. Therefore, the only two things that exist that separate us from the competition is brand and IP and the data that we have access to and that we use. I don't know if there's anything beyond that. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you?
Um, I think that's a big part of it, because you even think about these AI companies, right? So it's like content is getting commoditized because that's LLMs are just in a really good position to create content, right? And to do things like research and do things like web scraping and all kinds of different things, right? LLMs are just really good at it, and that technology exists and is basically available to anyone. Um, and so, but you say like, what's the IP behind like a chat GPT? It's like, well, it's the model, right? That's the moat, is that they have a model that they've trained. And if their model is more performant and is better at delivering results that the customers want, then more people will use ChatGPT and less people will use Claude, right? And so I think it's a similar thing where it's also a really great time to build this business, because effectively what we're selling is distribution. And pretty much every business owner on the planet right now will tell you that product is becoming commodity. Even something as simple as like building a software product is becoming so easy comparatively, and the ease of that is accelerating, that what will differentiate winners from losers will probably be distribution. And we're in a really good position to capture that because we're building a distribution engine.
Distribution makes me think of audience, and we've spoke kind of like passively about the idea of audience throughout this entire conversation. How have you seen like ownership of audience change over the past 5-10 years, and how do you kind of foresee that changing in the future? I think it's become a lot more personalized. You're able to have an Instagram account, a TikTok account, whatever. You're able to kind of capture that information, but it seems to me that everything's niching down to very specific things. I'm just wondering, you've got so much experience in the industry. How do you see audience changing?
Well, I guess like directionally, I actually see it becoming more consolidated in big data, big tech companies.
Okay.
So I guess what the big sort of like shift in digital marketing that happened with Facebook ads was it basically created a disparity between rented and owned audiences. And it's actually, I think that it's a really interesting conversation, renting and owning, because the way I look at it is like data is real estate, and different types of real estate and different places have different value, right? So like this plot that you could put a skyscraper on in like Columbus, Ohio versus New York City has like completely different value. I look at audiences in very much the same way, where it's like, somebody who has 20,000 subscribers in like a really high value niche versus 20,000 subscribers of like consumers, and like three of them buy like a supplement, like those have completely different value. And so there's like the whole owned versus rented dynamic I find really interesting, because here's a good example of this, which is um, I've talked to a lot of e-commerce brands that have at least at one point thought like maybe we should do lead generation for our, to grow our email list to sell more e-com product. And typically my answer to that is like, it's probably a bad idea. And the reason for that just boils down to unit economics of like, if you sell a $50 widget and you make like $25 or $30 in gross profit every time you sell that widget, it's like, well, then just back that unit economics into how much it would cost you to build an owned audience for this product, right? So if you're paying say $2 a subscriber, and then on average half of them are opening, you're like, great, that's like $4 openers, right? And then say like 5% of them are clicking. And my math sucks right now, but I think that's like over $100 per click. And you're like, okay, well then like how many of your products do they need to buy? It's like maybe there's some scenarios where if you're selling an expensive product or it's extremely profitable or it's a subscription where the sort of the LTV to CAC like is logical, you could do lead generation and make a profit on the lead generation. But the reason why e-commerce had such a big boom in the last like 15 years was precisely because you could literally just make a store on the internet and then run ads on Facebook, which is renting the audience. And then if you sort of like turn those dials and you were good enough at running the ads and you got better and better, you could run a profitable business where like Facebook and Google are practically ATM machines for your business. But comparatively, like building the audience, so like having an owned audience sounds great. And it generally like, yeah, of course, I'm an email guy. Like I think it's a good idea. But you have to get down into how much does it cost to build this audience? And then what is the value of that audience to me? And so you can do the same math with sponsors. You can do the same math with, B2B sales, et cetera. But it's kind of similar to like, if you buy a home, it's like, great. Well, like maybe your mortgage payment is the same as your rent, but then you add on property taxes and HOA and like fixing the roof and everything else. And it's like, actually, it would have been cheaper to rent. Plus, you would have had more flexibility if you were renting, right? So it's like, I actually look at owning versus renting real estate very much the same way that I look at owning versus renting audiences. And so there's a lot of context where owning your audience makes sense. But I think there are also some contexts where it actually just frankly makes more sense to rent.
Can you demarcate very clearly for the audience what the difference between an owned and a rented audience is, and like what platforms that exists on? What is the only owned audience? What is a rented audience?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even put something like TikTok followers in the camp of owned audience, because it's like,
That's what I was thinking as well. Anything that you're on someone else's platform is essentially a rented audience. And me and Ethan from Orbit were having a discussion about this 2 weeks ago, where email is one of the only things where the infrastructure for that actually predates the internet.
Yep.
So in terms of actually owning your audience, email might really be the last man standing for that.
Yeah. Well, and it's just I think I look at owning your audience as like there's kind of like two big components to it. One is that you own some kind of data, right? So even if you have like a SaaS app and then you have like all these like usage statistics about your SaaS app, it's like that's an owned audience because those are customers on your platform who are like doing something on this product. So you have to have some type of vertical that's data. So even like, everyone who has a Facebook account, that's Facebook's owned audience, which they then rent out to everyone via Facebook ads, right? So you have some type of data vertical, and then you have some type of, the other big component is some type of distribution vertical. And so it's like, okay, well, if I have an email list, I can go to any one of 20 different ESPs and email this email list. And so, but it's like because email is literally the most basic open internet protocol. It's like if you wanted to make your laptop an email server with an open source MTA and like send out bulk mail from your laptop, like you actually can, which is kind of insane. So, but it's like usually it's an owned audience is like a lot of people just think of it as the data, like, oh, if I have a giant spreadsheet of data, that's an owned audience. And it's like, yes, like that is probably the most important part, but then you also need a means of distribution to that audience. So if it's like my owned audience is I have 1 million users on my mobile application, it's like, well, maybe like one means of distribution is I can send them all a push notification. And that's me providing distribution to an owned audience. So that's how I tend to think about it.
Something you kind of touched on there is platforms. And this is another thing as well when I'm thinking about how do we make businesses defensible in the long term. Meta's done so much consolidation of their platform that it makes it almost fucking impossible to leave at this point. Once you're on their platform, they're providing so much value, you never want to leave. And essentially, like, how do you think about platforms when you think about developing Breaker? Because what it sounds like is once I'm on your platform and I'm running growth and everything's going out and the security's handled for me, I'm never ever going to want to leave. Is that something that factored into your discussion when developing it?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like if somebody wants to leave, like they own their email list, they can take their email list and go to MailChimp, like if they want to. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately like that is what a platform provides is it provides some type of infrastructure. And so like the infrastructure we provide is both mailing infrastructure and growth infrastructure. And then, what you pay for the platform is the same as like, if you just wanted to send out mail through like your own like Amazon SES server, it's like, yeah, you can. But it's just the difference is that where the service part of the SaaS acronym comes into play is like, we've already built all this stuff. You could just use ours for a monthly subscription. That's what it is. But yeah, I mean, that to me, a platform is that.
Tell me about service, right? Because obviously there's different sizes of platform, right? Google's such a fucking huge platform that once you're on it, it's impossible to get off because they're everywhere and you need to use them for everything. And I don't ever want to leave. But if I try to get in touch with Google Help because I want to change something in my Gmail, I don't understand anything in admin, it's impossible. Like they just don't care enough to provide the customer support. So when we're talking about that service part of an acronym, like how important do you think having a real live human with experience such as yourself is going to be for businesses or that valuation between 7, 8, 9 figures?
Well, I think from my side of the perspective, like having the platform, I think it'll go through stages. Like right now, if you sign up for Breaker and you hit that little chat bot, you're actually just slacking me. Like you're just talking, like that's what's happening. So like, yeah, you get great customer service because I will just like go in there and we can fix it or do whatever. But it really like the way I think about like, Amazon, Google, like the big tech companies, it's really just issues of scale that are like, frankly, hard for, I think, a lot of consumers to understand of like, can you just fathom how many like customer support chats like Amazon gets like every like minute? It's like so many. So like, of course, Amazon is going to be like, okay, how do we put in some AI so that we don't have to hire more customer support reps? And then like, how do we put in like a lower tier of customer support rep that basically just tries to make you go away unless it's a really big problem. And then it gets escalated to someone who can like actually solve your problem. And then so the business interest in that scenario is like keeping labor costs low and like trying to automate as much as possible. And if it's just like oh, I need to reset my password. It's like, please look at the help article. Please don't talk to us, like, because that costs money. But then I think it's about sheer scale. It's like, I think with Breaker, like, we're creating a bunch of documentation, and then our chatbot will help you find the right document to solve your problem if you want to. But, for a while, at least, you'll be able to talk to a real human being. But also, because we're in this age of AI, like, frankly, like, I'm very curious to see if we can build this business up to a really big size and have like a full-time team of like 2 or 3 people. It's like, how much can we do when it comes to like agents and automations and everything else? Because I think it's the right time to at least try to build something like that.
How are you using AI and automation and agents internally?
Well, I guess like personally, I use AI for a bunch of stuff. Like I obviously use AI to make content. I've been using the ChatGPT agent a lot. I'm actually really impressed with the ChatGPT agent. It's really good. Before that, it was like Manus was like the gold standard on agents, but the new ChatGPT agent is like even better than Manus. But like at least like internally in our business, like we have layers of it that are built into the algo, where like there are cases where an LLM is better at something than even like creating your own algorithm is, right? So you kind of like strategically plug in LLMs into parts of your process, I think is a good way to go. And then of course, like with customer support and like help widgets, it's like once you have the documentation, you can basically create an AI like help desk that is essentially just like a really fancy search function for your documentation. So I think like there's no like crazy big implementation. I think we're plugging it in strategically into parts of the business where it makes sense. And then I think as the technology gets better and better, I think it'll just be a bigger and bigger part of the business.
I've got a question for you, and it's going to be broad and a little confusing. When I think about someone that has a good macro perspective on everything tech, media, AI, just business in general, you're one of the first people I think of. So I am kind of curious from you, like, do you have any predictions in the coming years of where you see generally how we're going to be moving through tech, through audience, through this on a societal level? Again, I told you this would be a very broad perspective, but I guess like, do you have any kind of sweeping declarations or predictions that you imagine for the next couple of years?
I find myself kind of in the middle of like the doomers and I guess you would say like the protagonists, like one of, uh, there's a guy I know, and he basically thinks that like AI like is the apocalypse, and it's only a matter of time before it like basically just like goes full genocidal, and like the human population is just like over. And I'm like, I don't think that makes sense. Like AI doesn't actually have like an internal modus operandi. So it's like, yeah, if you basically make the AI equivalent of like a weapon of mass destruction and then you put it in the wrong hands, it's like, yeah, it could be catastrophic. But like, we've navigated that many times, with nuclear devices and all kinds of other types of like really high risk devices. And so I don't think AI is going to be very different from that perspective of like, yeah, like there's definitely some risk involved. Then there's kind of I would say like maybe you're like sort of average doomer, which basically just thinks that it's going to automate a gazillion jobs, right? And it's going to cause a lot of issues. I think there's definitely some probability there. It's more or less already happening in some areas. So it's like if you're like graduating with like a computer science degree right now, or you're like trying to get into like pre-law and things like that, it's more difficult because of AI. Um, but at the same time, like I think of it like I think of a lot of technical developments of like, every business used to have like an army of secretaries that knew how to type. That doesn't exist anymore, right? Like because we have computers and everybody learned how to type, et cetera. And so like, yeah, like that job doesn't exist, at least doesn't exist in the same way that it used to. So I think there will be some disruption in different industries where AI will replace roles or parts of roles, but then we'll also find more productive things. So I actually think that like the overall productivity will go up. I think there will be some really inconvenient periods where like there will be groups of people or entire sort of like professional industries where there are groups of people where maybe they don't know what to do, but then just as we've done for the rest of human history, we'll figure it out. And then what will happen on the other side is we'll have a society that's more productive. So I generally view it as like a net positive.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I
Yeah.
have what? Sorry, Inigo, you're going to add something else?
Uh, I mean, I could. There's, I guess, like when it comes to email, I think the part about email that's not being discussed as much is how much the inbox is going to change. And
Mm.
that I'm very curious about. So, like, obviously, you have like your basic helper stuff. You have like Gemini in the inbox. I just think but there's also like a gazillion startups that are basically trying to like recreate like the inbox. Maybe most notably like
Superhuman just
Notion
got
Mail.
acquired, no?
Do what?
Superhuman just got acquired recently, no?
There's Superhuman is kind of the OG. Now there's like Notion Mail. There's a bunch of mail apps. I think like overcoming like Google and Yahoo's distribution is going to be incredibly difficult. So I don't think that like those inboxes are like going to go away and like everybody's going to like there are still people out there with like Hotmail and AOL addresses, right? So you're like, okay, I think this will still exist. Um, but I do think that there will be some really interesting changes with even like if an AI is just filtering my mail for me and making my inbox as helpful / entertaining as possible, it's like, do you even need something like a spam folder? Do you even like is my inbox even organized like chronologically, right? And I think
Mm.
so. I think something's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know what it is, but I think the inbox is going to start looking really different. And then as a byproduct of whatever that is, sender behavior will change. But it's kind of TBD. Like it could be, there might be parts of
Mm.
it that sound bad, but there might be parts of it that are actually really good. Where it's like, okay, like if you say like AI is going to summarize my newsletters today, you're like, oh no, like nobody's looking at my sponsor, right? Like you're like, okay, I could imagine that being a potential problem. But then on the flip side, it's like if I'm like in my weird little email chat and I'm like, hey, I need this thing, they're like, oh, well, like, you just got a marketing email a week ago from this guy and he says he solves that problem and you didn't see it because it got AI filtered. And I'm like, well, that would be
Mm.
good. So it's like, it's very like, it's basically just a giant question mark, but I'm curious to see how it plays out.
I mean, context for that as well. Superhuman, who is this, like, they were trying to make it faster, more efficient. It wasn't sticky enough for me to stick around their platform. Reported that they got acquired by Grammarly for 800 million plus. So there's obviously some degree of usability here. Like you're marking definitely the right industry, and I think it's due time that this interface is updated. Right, it's been the same forever. I think for me personally, as an individual, like I would want to speak to my email like a secretary. Like I want to
Yep.
come in and be like, okay, like what have I got to reply to? What have I missed 2 weeks ago? And just speak to an AI avatar that's just going to talk about like, okay, I want to draft out a reply. It kind of says this. No, okay, change it that way. If I can just have a conversation, I come in, have a conversation in my inbox for 30 minutes. It's kind of like almost what that'll end up being is just indirect communication between you and another human with just like an AI as a translation layer in the middle, which I think is ideal, right? It's just async communication taken to the nth degree.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, I mean, it seems to me that's like kind of what LLMs were like born to do. I mean, I think email is like a perfect application of a lot of that tech. Um, the chatbot thing's interesting. I mean, for me, I wouldn't even mind if like I don't even talk to the AI, but it just like sorts my inbox where it's like if I got an email at 5 a.m. about something really important and it already got buried in 50 other emails, like it just like sticks it at the top, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like here you
It's like
go.
it's maybe trained on that long discussion you have on it, on like your priorities, your behaviors, stuff like that, and then it priorities your inbox in there
Exactly.
as well, based on the context.
I think that would be really cool.
Let's go and start another business, Ben. Screwbreaker, come on.
That's the thing. A lot of my friends are like, "Oh, like, are you going to do this for like a decade?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I was like, "I think I might sell it, and then I might go crazy and do like AI on the blockchain, or like I just feel like there's so much there that it's like there's too many ideas." So
This leads me on to my last question. My last question, I ask every single one of my guests the same question. I will give you no further context once I've asked it and just make of it what you will. And I also recommend taking 10 seconds to actually think about it before you answer. Ben, why do you do what you do?
I think I'll answer it like on a personal level and then on like a broader level. So like on a personal level, what's pretty much always motivated me was doing interesting things that pay the bills. Like if you basically just like look at my resume, like professionally speaking, it's like sometimes people look at it and they're like, this is so random. Like what on like you're not like building a career. Like what are you doing? And like the answer to that question for me has always just been like, oh, I was like given the opportunity to work on a really interesting problem and I could pay rent at the same time, and that's a great deal. And so like that's like personally, that's always been sort of my North Star. Like I don't even have sometimes these entrepreneurship communities, even like I don't even have like a number in my mind of like I got to make this much money. Like this is just where it's taken me to just work on interesting problems and progress. And then more broadly, like the I think a lot of it boils down to which like our holding company is Noble Digital. Holding our holding company has, you know, mission, vision, values. And essentially what the mission, vision, values boils down to is is basically make ethical marketing easier. That's really what it boils down to, where it's like great marketing is if somebody creates an actually amazing product and they're trying to get it in front of the right person at the right place at the right time. That's what truly great marketing is. And so like I've turned down contracts with businesses because I thought that like frankly their product like wasn't a net positive on like the planet. Like it didn't actually make anybody's life better. But if somebody's actually trying to, and I think this is even true for just something like, oh, how do I get PMF? You can think about product market fit selfishly as like, if I have PMF, then we'll make tons of money. That's true. But also because at least in the Western world, we live in at least what for now is a capitalist society. It's like generally speaking, and of course there's, you can grift and you can do all this other stuff, but generally speaking, you can have a very successful business just by solving real problems for people. And when you solve real problems, you enable more good things to happen.
Love that answer. Ben, I want to thank you for your time. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, who you are, how do they go about doing that?
So if you're curious about Breaker, you can go to joinbreaker.ai. You can learn more there. And then if you're curious just to learn more about me or just follow me on the internet, I'm mostly on Twitter and LinkedIn. So you can just punch Ben Billups into Twitter or LinkedIn. I'll pop right up.
Beautiful. Ben, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Liam.